I have a bit of a confession to make. When I sit down to write music, I don't always know what I'm going to write. The creativity doesn't just come flowing out of me as soon as I sit down. Sometimes I have no idea what I'm going to write. But I know that I have a little bit of time, and I know that I feel like I want to work in music, but I don't know what the song is going to sound like. I'm not some sort of savant that has it playing in my head, and I can just come to Ableton and put it into practice. That's the truth. So sometimes when I know that I want to work, I've got to find inspiration wherever I can. Sometimes the creativity comes once we just step forward a little bit. In this particular case, I've got a little bit of percussion, but I don't know what this song sounds like yet. And one way that you can start to get off on the right foot is by putting in a little bit of a groove. One of the ways that I do that is through sub bass. Sub bass is something that will hit you in the chest. It'll give it more of a vibe, it'll give it a pulse, so to speak. And that's really important with electronic music. So I'm going to show you a technique today to start when you don't have a starting point. One of the more important things to consider with bass lines, with sub bass lines, is that we need to pull the listener into some sort of a groove. You got to get their shoulders shimmying, even in their head. Now I'm going to open up one of my favorite synths called Diva. I like Diva because it's a nice, simple synth to work with, and it actually replicates a lot of hardware synths that I play with. I've used it for a few years, and I have a few go-to samples that I like to go to. I'm going to start up a new sub bass. Okay, we're going to start with a nice low pulse. Now, the trick with a good sub bass is that it doesn't have to be too complex. It just needs to set the foundation for the track to come. It just kind of gets your feet in the mud a little bit, and you can feel it in your chest. So we're going to find a nice sub bass sound here. It's a little high. That's nice. Okay. And what I want to do is work away from the kick and the hi-hats. The kick and the hi-hats are on, of course, the 1 and the 3 space, right? Kick, hat. So we want to avoid those two places. A nice place for me to start to find a swing and a groove is actually on the last space right here, okay? So when we play that with the kick, I'll play it just by itself with the kick. Okay? All we're trying to do is get the listener to do this. And working outside of the 1-2 beats is crucial for doing that. Otherwise, if you start working within the same places, the stereotypical bassline places right on the 1s and 2s, you start to get a more mechanical feel. It starts to sound like a marching band or a robotic march. So we don't want to do that. If you want to do that, if it's part of your style, if it's part of your genre, more power to you. For me personally, I like to have that kind of loose, natural swing. Now, it's still a little bit mid-range for me, so what I'm going to do is come in here. I'm just going to pull the cutoff down a little bit so we get nice and subby, just nice and deep. Okay, just right down there. Cool? So we've got to start here. Now, I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to go in, and I'm going to change my synth sound. Let's do something like this, okay? And we are going to accent the original sub bass. We're going to work with it so that we start to get a little bit of dimension and depth to our track. Okay? Okay. Very mid-range. Let's get this into a subby range here. There we go. Now, as we pull it into the same frequency range, you can actually hear how they start to work with one another. That's what we want for a bass line. We don't want people to know that you're using two separate synths and two separate patterns to create one bass line. We want the bass line to feel like one fluid animal, right? And we do that by working with multiple channels with slightly different sounds, and it gives it that flow, you know? It's a little bit more rolling now. To the untrained ear or people that aren't paying attention too closely, it sounds like one sound. So we're gonna do it again. I'm gonna duplicate this channel again, and we're gonna find an accent to the existing sub bass that we've got. We're gonna keep putting the focus on that and building it up. So let's find a new preset here. Let's see how that one sounds. And I'm gonna just keep it simple. I like it. Right there. We're gonna accent that final note. Now this is a pretty gritty feel, right? It's not exactly in the sub range, but one thing I want you to learn is that you can look through presets and samples forever. In fact, it's one of the biggest time wasters when you're trying to be creative. So what you want to get in the habit of doing is finding a sound that's close, and then you can edit and modify it on the fly. There's so many different tools that you can use to bring it back to where you want it to be. Otherwise, you're just gonna be scrolling and clicking and scrolling and clicking, and you're gonna lose that creative flow. And that's the most important thing when you're in the zone. So for this, it's a little bit mid-range. And this is a good example here. If you're close, I want that buzziness in the low frequencies, but I want to cut the top end out. You can do that with an EQ, just like this. Let's hear how this sounds. There we go. You can feel now this bass line actually has movement. It goes down and it goes up at the end. That's done with 3 different sounds. But to anybody else just listening to this track, it feels like one fluid moving bass line. But now we've got movement. Now we've got a little bit of a footing. Already with this bass line where we just kind of threw sounds in here, I can hear other melodic parts that I can start to add in. Now I know where I want to go with this bass line. Now I know what I can do next. And it started with no ideas. I didn't know what I was going to put in here, but already I can catch a vibe from this track. I know where I can place my sounds. And that will help you get to the next level. And that will help you get to the next stage of writing your track. Let's hear it with a little bit of percussion on top as well. That's going to work. Now we can move along, keep writing our track, keep in that creative zone, and that's really what's most important when you're writing music. I hope you like this tip today and you can use it in your own music, and it'll help you get to the next level. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.